seatbelt. It's going to be a bumpy ride.
Chrissie is hilarious.
Chrissie, have you ever heard of the comedian Basha K. Ali?
No, that sounds like something you yell at before you blow up a plane.
30 seconds remaining.
But you know what, good thing to say, I dabbled in stand-up for something. I haven't been disrespectful to you at all.
I was very confused by the title, Everything Everywhere All at Once, because that's also what we call it when Ash takes off his shirt. I shouldn't be up here. I should be in school on the other side of the ocean. Ooh, what's up, boys and girls? Welcome to another episode of the Chrissie Mayr podcast. We're on iTunes, YouTube, Spotify, SoundCloud, Rumble, Rockfin, all of the places. I just got back from California. I feel like I got a cold over there. I don't think it's AIDS. I think I'll live. It'll be all right. I had a really awesome time, though. We had packed shows Thursday, Friday, Saturday night. So I had such a better time than I thought I would. I thought it was going to be like homeless tents everywhere. And California is pretty based. It's got a lot of based parts to it. I got more shows coming up. Oh, don't you worry. I got more comedy shows coming up. I just updated my calendar. Woohoo! Okay, so in 3 weeks, this is coming up, guys. I'll be headlining in New York City. Is there anybody left? I hope so. Come see me at the Grizzly Pear Midtown on West 54th Street on Saturday, March 25th. I'm doing an 8 and 10 o'clock show. This is a nice little club. The aesthetic is kind of classy, retro, almost like feels like a speakeasy. Feels like an old school comedy club, but it's got like a nice bar in the front, so it's a good hang. Then I'll be in Staten Island, the tropical Staten Island, headlining at the Reef at Paradise Island, Friday, April 7th. Then I'm heading to Jersey, Morris Plains, New Jersey, Saturday, April 8th, headlining Tiff's Ale House, also known as the Dojo of Comedy. Then I'll be heading to, then we got a Vegas show. Tickets are not up yet, but they will be. So if you're going to be in Vegas for the Friday Night Tights meetup, come to my comedy show. It's going to be that Thursday, April 27th. So I believe it's going to be the F&T meetup that Wednesday, my comedy show on the Thursday. And then I think we'll probably do a Friday Night Tights from down there on Friday. But tickets should be available tomorrow. So I'll let you guys know when they're ready to go. Then I'll be in Dallas the first weekend of May, back at Hyenas Comedy Club. I love that place. 2 shows Friday, 2 shows Saturday. That's May 5th and 6th. Lila Hart will be opening for me these shows as well, and in Vegas. Then I'm heading to Richmond Wednesday, August 9th. I'll be at the Sandman Comedy Club in Richmond, Virginia. I haven't performed in Virginia yet. This is exciting. And then I got Anime Matsuri that weekend in Houston. Simpcast will be at this convention August 10th through 13th. We'll have a booth. We'll have a panel. You can come simp with us. And then I'll be headlining the same weekend in Houston at the Secret Group Friday, August 11th. So if you know you're coming to that convention, get your tickets for the show that Friday. It'll be kind of like an unofficial after party. Wear your costume, whatever. Just come and be weird. Be yourself. Okay, time for our guest. I'm very excited to bring him on. He's super smart. He is the author of Raising Victims, a book that you can buy on Amazon right now. He's also the host of the podcast called Informed Dissent. He is an advocate for post-racial identity. I want to get into what that is. I don't think I've heard. I think I'm going to find out if he's invented that term, but I like it. I like the sound of it. Welcome to the show, Leonydus Johnson. Hello.
Hello. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
I'm so excited that you're here. I started listening. I always listen to a few episodes of anybody that I'm going to have on, and I'm just like, I like when I find myself going, oh yeah, like I just agree along. I mean, it's fun to disagree too, but
sure, yeah. Well, thank you. Well, thank you for listening. I appreciate it. Yeah.
Oh yeah, you're great.
Whether you agree or disagree, yeah.
Yeah, you have a very soothing voice. Do you hear that a
why,
lot?
thank you so much.
Oh, this voice? Is this as soothing?
Is this what you mean? Oh, let me get closer to the microphone.
Then you whip out a saxophone and you start playing Careless
Right.
Whispers.
Yeah.
Who, me? This whole thing? Leonydus, how did you get to be, I guess sort of a cultural commentator and author? I sometimes don't know
It's
how to describe, like, being part of this internet culture
right.
commentary world, but you're a legit author, so I already
I'm a
respect you.
published author now. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's crazy. But I don't know. I honestly don't know how this happened. It just one day I woke up and I was an author and podcaster, and it's crazy. Because Chrissy, I spent my entire life being apolitical, and I was never into politics. I was never into paying attention to what was going on. I mean, I watched C-SPAN and it's like, this is ridiculous. Who watches this stuff? This is insane. Like, I didn't care. So, and it wasn't until the race stuff really started taking off, probably around the time that Trayvon Martin was killed. And what was that, 2012? And then
Wow, that long ago? Okay. So is that like the beginning of BLM?
yeah, it actually was. Yeah.
Okay.
BLM was formed because of the Trayvon Martin stuff, which they weren't really that prominent at that point, but it was really the Michael Brown stuff in 2014 when they really started to take off. And then that kid was killed in Cleveland. I'm forgetting his name, Tamir Rice. That was killed later that year, and then everything started to really spiral out of control. But I really started to pay attention because the media was lying about everything related to these cases and manipulating people and really trying to push these racial narratives and racial division. And I was like, dude, what is happening? Like, I had naively trusted the media up to that point and thought, maybe sometimes they get things wrong, but for the most part, they're trying to just report the news. I was very naive. I had no idea what was going on. Yeah, and
Just
then
by,
all that.
Yeah.
So all that, I was like, so if they're lying about that, what else are they lying about? If they're lying about hands up, don't shoot, then what else are they lying about? And so I started looking into it and started researching things on my own. And turns out they're lying about a whole heck of a lot. And so I was like, oh my gosh, it was like a completely incredible awakening for me at that point. So I started really looking into things and really researching stuff on my own. One of my friends put me on to Thomas Sowell, so I started reading his books and watching his videos, and I started looking at Milton Friedman, and I really took the deep dive into the Chicago School of Economics, and then the whole idea of libertarian politics and the
What were your
ridiculous
what were your biggest takeaways from Sowell and Friedman? Like,
oh man, the biggest takeaway. I mean, Sowell completely changed my viewpoint on race and politics and government and the role of government in society. I had never, like I said, I was mostly apolitical. I never really considered deeply the role of government or these ideas around what government should be doing in society. It's just not something I had thought about before.
It seemed boring. It seemed boring and something
like,
that I would never be connected to because I never wanted to major in politics. So I just was like, what's the point?
Right. Yeah. So let them worry about it. I was mostly worried about acting and theater and music and things like that. I was worried about being a creative. I didn't care about politics. But yeah, I mean, the idea is that, everything is basically an economic transaction. If you read Basic Economics by Thomas Sowell, one of the biggest takeaways I took from that book is that everything can be viewed from this economic lens. Everything is a trade-off. There is no free lunch. There are no real solutions to problems. You're only trading one problem for another, and then you're basically just deciding which problem is more tolerable. And that's not something I had really considered before. That's not something most people consider. They don't think. They're just like, oh, I need to solve the problem, not that this solution is actually going to create other problems. And so once you think about it that way, then it's like, oh man, like all these political solutions are not solutions at all. Like they're just creating more problems, and it changes how you view the government. So
cool. And then when it kind of opens it up, you're like, oh, everyone should care about this. When you really see kind of like the inner workings.
Right,
like,
right.
Oh, we're all
right.
being taken advantage of. Cool. Yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, and that's basically what happened. As you know, I started putting out my ideas on social media and started talking about this stuff more as I learned things and started to have more ideas, and it started to resonate with people. And I accidentally built a following on social media. It's not something I intended to do again, but I ended up with 130,000 followers on Twitter or something like that. And I was approached by a literary agent who asked me if I wanted to write a book on the race stuff that I was talking about, because I had been talking about race on a frequent basis and critical race theory and color blindness in a post-racial society and things like that. And he asked me if I wanted to write that, and then we could pitch it to publishers. And I was like, yeah, man, absolutely. And I was originally going to write something more general around color blindness, but we decided to hone in on critical race theory because it's such an important aspect of what's happening right now. And so I wrote Raising Victims. It took me about a year to write it. And publisher Regnery and Salem Books, which is an imprint of Regnery, picked it up. And now I'm a published author, which is crazy.
Wow. That's really exciting.
Yeah.
What was your process like for writing the book? It seems like just a really daunting process.
Yeah, so one of the things I really wanted to do is I wanted to really make sure that I communicated what critical race theory was and how it operates and what the presuppositions are. And so in order to do that, I had to research quite a bit of the founders and the people who had developed critical race theory, which a good resource if you're interested is Critical Race Theory and the Introduction by Richard Delgado, which really encapsulates what critical race theory is and what they actually believe. And it goes much deeper than what people will say, like, oh, we just want to teach the history of slavery. No, that's not what they're trying to do. They're clearly trying to implement a cultural revolution and upend society because they believe it's entirely imbibed with racism. But I go deeply into that in the book, but I had to really research and really look into different things and make sure I knew my stuff. But it was stuff I was talking about anyway, so it wasn't really that difficult as far as process goes, because these were things that I had already thought about deeply. Diversity, equity, inclusion, the idea of color blindness in a post-racial society, the idea of gratitude and perspective as antidotes to critical race theory. I talk about all these things in the book, and these are things that I had been ruminating on anyway. I'd been talking about them anyway, so it was pretty easy to go ahead and just put it all together and then organize it and then put it into a book. So it was the longest part of the process, I think, was the editing process. Trying to get everything cleaned up and fixed, because I'm very bad about writing in passive language. But so my editor was like, no, you can't do that. So I spent a lot of time fixing things. But other than that, it wasn't too bad. It was pretty smooth process.
When writing this book, did it occur to you, or did you make the conscious choice to try to write to appeal to or reach the people that fully believe this, that are like fully brainwashed, or however you want to describe it, like completely all about it? Or did you just feel like, okay, I just have to write from where I am and my understanding of things?
I mean, a little bit. You always have to think about your audience when you're writing, right? And you have to know who's going to be reading it, and you have to format it that way. The people that I was really writing for were the people who maybe believe some of the critical race theory stuff on the surface, just because they believe in things like being against racism. So maybe they'll fall into line with the anti-racism rhetoric, or they believe that Black Lives Matter, so they'll fall in line with Black Lives Matter rhetoric, not understanding that those kind of terms are manipulative and they're sanitized and they're hiding the radical ideology underneath of it. So I wrote the book to really get people to understand what critical race theory is, because again, you attack critical race theory and they'll tell you, like, you don't know what it is. We're just trying to teach history in public schools, and you don't want us to teach history. And so people aren't really equipped on it, right? And people aren't really equipped all the time to push back against that, because they're like, oh yeah, of course I want you to teach the history of racism and slavery. I just don't want my kid to be told that they need to deconstruct their whiteness, like it's. And so
it's
people
also
need
how you teach history. It's everything is in the how. And that's what I get nervous
Right.
for when I'm just like, oh, these textbooks that are being rewritten and have been rewritten like as we speak. Like it's very scary. It's just it's scary to think about because it's like he who has control of the textbooks, like that's and we didn't used to have to
Right.
think about that when we were in school. We're just like we figured
I
what we
know.
were learning was, was pretty much the truth.
Right. Yeah, and that you're absolutely spot on. It's about how they teach the history. And I always liken it to when people say that critical race theory is not being taught in public schools, or yeah, you don't know what you're talking about. It's not critical race, whatever. I liken it to a music teacher, or a person goes to university and they learn advanced music theory, and they're going to be a music teacher, and then they go to K through 12 classrooms. They're not teaching their kids advanced music theory. They're teaching them how to sing the songs, right? Like,
Yeah.
they're not teaching them the inner workings of the theory, or the deep parts of the theory that they learned at university. They're teaching them how to sing and how to read the notes. Same thing with critical race theory. These people are going to colleges and universities, and they're learning, that racism is interwoven into the fabric of our society, and we need to send you out to deconstruct our institutions and institute this cultural revolution. And they're not teaching that to kids in the classrooms, but they're teaching them how to sing the songs, how to read the
That's
notes.
so similar with what's going on with like queer theory and gender identity, because it's like the whole the trans movement and the social right, everything that's going on, how it's been popularized in culture. These were terms and like different types of sexuality. Like this was all stuff I learned about in my women's studies minor in college. So there's no reason why kids have to be learning concepts, like advanced concepts about sexuality and gender ideology, like
Right.
that you would first of all, you choose to, like, I, for some reason, chose to study that in college. I was a brainwashed feminist. I was like, let's do this. And there's just no reason why these similarly very advanced concepts about queer theory need to be taught to anybody lower than a college level. Who
You're absolutely right.
if
Yeah.
you're interested in that, you're like, oh, okay, like I'm intellectually curious about this. Like, sure, let's go deep into that. Sure, that's totally what I did. Now I see the phrases and concept I learned at an advanced level, like just being, just being taught by your freaking 5th grade teacher while she comes out to you. She comes out to her
Right.
classroom, and the kids are like, I'm just trying to like learn how to spell here. Like I'm just trying to do math.
Right. It's
So it's like,
that
why,
meme.
like,
Yeah.
where did this come from? Like this idea that we need to bring super advanced theories, like with critical race and with like queer theory. Like when did that become so important to bring that down? There's no other way I can describe it other than indoctrination. Like you're bringing that down to a level where people are much younger because kids are sponge-like, and
Yep.
they pick up ideas. The earlier they are, the more likely they are to believe it, unless they become really interested in it and then they want to study it in college or in their adulthood. But it's like you're more vulnerable as a kid, and you really do. The younger you are, the more you look at your teachers, like almost like parents sometimes.
Yeah, I hesitate to use the word because a lot of times people turn off when they hear it because it sounds like conspiracy theory or it gets overused anyway. But it really is Marxism. It's at its root, it's
Yeah.
Marxist ideology. And I think what people need to understand is that, and well, the gender stuff, the queer theory stuff, all of that is the critical race theory stuff. All of that is the fruit from the same tree. It's all being used up in society, and it's all driven from this ideology that our entire society is built to oppress certain people and to uplift others. And so you already have this dichotomy of oppressors and victims. And so the only solution then is to tear down society and rebuild it into this communist utopia. So that's the basic essence of it. But critical race theory specifically, the founders will say this explicitly, that it has two components to it. It has an academic component and it has an activist component. And they say that explicitly, that they're training people as activists to go out into society and to, what the way they put it is, to affect social change. But what they're actually doing is they're tearing down the institutions and trying to rebuild them. And so that's why they're going after children. What's the best way to affect social change or to tear down and change an institution or to change an entire society is to reach the next generation and infuse those ideas into them so that they grow up and they become foot soldiers for the cause. I mean, and we've seen that throughout Marxism all over the place. We saw that with the Red Guard in China during the Chinese Cultural Revolution. Kids carrying the ideological cause, and it's not all that surprising that this is what they're doing and that they're targeting children. I think part of it might be that they are looking for validation for their ideology. And, one way you do that is you normalize it, and you can normalize it by making it normal in public schools and with the next generation. So they grow up thinking these things are normal. I think that's pertinent when it comes to gender specifically. You have, making kids think that men can be women, so that you normalize it throughout society. But the deeper aspect of it is that they're trying to infuse this ideology into every system that they can in order to tear down society, tear down the fabric of society, and they rebuild it. Is they really do believe that the entirety of society is infused with racism and sexism and transphobia or whatever it may be, some form of oppression, and that it all needs to be torn down. And that's not an exaggeration. They state that belief explicitly.
I don't understand why you would teach your child that. Like, even if it were true that black and brown people were kept down in society, could never be as successful. Even if you truly believe that, you have to be able to see, okay, there are exceptions to the rule. And then you point out every successful black and brown business owner, every successful black and brown celebrity, athlete, musician. So when you believe that there are exceptions, like, wouldn't you want your children to like encourage them to be part of the exception to the rule, even if that were true? Why would you just pound it into them that, like, this is what you're growing up in, so get ready to fail?
Right. Yeah. I have a bachelor's degree in psychology, and I find psychology very interesting. So I talk about psychological concepts pretty frequently. And one of the psychological concepts I always bring up with what you're talking about is the idea of learned helplessness. And when you teach children that they can't succeed because they have an external locus of control, the system is acting upon them and controlling all of their outcomes. So their hands are not on the steering wheel of their life, and they can't control their destiny because all these external forces are acting on them and they can't escape it. If you teach them that, they're going to have a sense of learned helplessness, and they're going to think that they can't succeed. And the American Psychological Association's woke now, so maybe not now, but before, any psychologist worth their salt would have told you that teaching kids to have a sense of victimhood, a sense of resentment, a sense of grievance, living in the past, having that sense of learned helplessness. And not just kids, adults too, but having anybody have those sort of characteristics and personality traits is going to lead to negative outcomes. It's not going to be a good situation for them. And one of the stories I like to tell is the story of Finding Nemo, when Nemo gets stuck in the filter tube in the fish tank. And, all the fish in the tank are coming, freaking out about it. It's like, oh no, he's stuck. He's in danger. We got to help him. He can't get out on his own, whatever. And Nemo himself thinks that he can't get out on his own. And he's victimized, he's being oppressed by the fish tank, whatever. and then Gil comes out and Gil's like, nobody touch him, right? Nobody touch him. Because Gil recognizes that Nemo has the ability to swim out on his own. He has the strength. He can have the courage and bravery. He can do it. And he knew that he could either affirm Nemo's victimhood and say, yeah, dude, you have a gimpy fin. It's not fair that you're stuck in that filter tube. You're oppressed. You should feel victimized. None of these other fish are stuck in there.
Differently abled. Yeah.
Differently abled. Yeah. Like, maybe we should put these other fish in the filter tube to make you feel better, because this is not fair at all. And none of that would have helped him get out of the tube. It would just, we would just been talking about it and then feeling victimized. But Gil didn't do that. He said, listen, like, you have the ability to do this. You have the strength to do this. You have the courage to do this. You just have to do it. And he was able to. And
Wow, I
so
want to
he
rewatch the movie
rejected
now.
him.
I don't remember that scene.
Yeah, and then later on in the movie, he actually uses his courage to help a bunch of fish escape a net, and his dad believes in him and helps him do it, and he uses that sense of ability, that sense of courage to accomplish that, whereas before he would have felt like a victim and felt like he wasn't able to do it. So it's a very wonderful message that's embedded in a Disney movie, believe it or not, before Disney went woke. But
now I could see if they had a remake of Nemo, I could see Disney being like, that filter is really, is partial to taking down orange fish, or like,
yeah, right. We need fish justice, fish tank justice. This is
you were targeted specifically for your fin color and
your
shape.
orange, yeah, just
your orangeness.
Yeah. Your orangeness. Yeah.
Orange fish bad. You had kind of a theater background. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
You were kind of like, you basically created a whole theater program for a high school, or you were running the program?
I did, yeah. Well, I ran a drama program at a high school near where I live for a couple years. I worked with the Columbus Children's Theater in Columbus, Ohio for a couple years, and actually wrote a couple musicals for them. And I had my own theater company in Athens, Ohio, which for sports fans, that's Joe Burrow town. And I ran that for a couple years. And yeah, then I still do community theater from time to time. I did Shrek last summer. I played Donkey. That was a lot of
wow, that's really cool. Yeah, I was reading through your bio. Like, are you kind of interested in, like, the only example I can think of is Hamilton, which is like a combination of like rap or music and like a play, basically, as a way of storytelling. And that's one of the musicals I really loved. Like, I've only been to a handful, like Book of Mormon, Hamilton. I only went because my sister's a history teacher. I'm like, all right, I'm going to take you to this. And I really enjoyed it. I think that's, I don't know, people don't like What's His Face, but I'm like, hey, that's a great musical.
No, I love Hamilton. Lin-Manuel Miranda, I think.
Yeah.
But I don't have a huge problem with them. I mean, like, the theater world is very far left. It's very progressive. So you kind of expect that. Yeah, you kind of. I mean, even working on Shrek at a summer theater in Athens, which Athens is pretty far left. It's a pretty progressive town. But working. I mean, and pretty much everybody in the cast was super progressive, and I'm like the only more conservative person. And so you kind of get used to that kind of thing. But I as far as art goes, Hamilton, I think Hamilton's great. I love it. But yeah,
did you get out of the theater community like before the pandemic or during, or did that kind of inspire you to like move away from it with the lockdowns and everything?
I still do it from time to time. I'm still somewhat engaged with the theater community. And I was going to mention, even with Shrek last summer, I had some people protest my casting.
What?
Again, yeah, because they recognized who I was from, I guess, Fox News or something. I don't know, but they protested it, and they weren't happy that the production had casted me as Donkey. So it ended up not coming. Nothing came of it. There were no real problems, but they tried to cause problems, but thankfully nothing.
What was their claim? What was their argument?
That I had appeared on Fox News, that I was a conservative, and
that's it. Wow.
They just didn't like my positions. They didn't like my political positions. They thought that I was hateful and bigoted. I mean, the normal stuff, my internalized white supremacy, all that stuff. Yeah.
It's exhausting, all of it. Was there one specific moment? I guess you kind of explained it earlier. It was more, with Tamir Rice and like the difference, with each kind of like murder or killing that kind of started to blow up BLM. Was it just sort of that natural progression that got you interested in studying critical race theory?
Yeah, I don't think it was anything specific. Like there wasn't like a day where I woke up and I said, you know what, today's the critical race theory day, or today's the day we focus on race. It had started to become more and more prevalent in the public consciousness. People were becoming more aware of it. People were talking about it being implemented in public schools. The debates were happening. Parents were starting to push back on the race-centric curriculums, things like that. And, the more and more that people were talking about it and deflecting, and the people who support it were deflecting and pretending that people didn't know what it was, the more I wanted to talk about it and really expose it for what it was. Which there's been quite a few people who have done that pretty successfully. I think like Christopher Rufo has been one of the main people that have been pushing against it. Which I have an endorsement from him for the book, which I'm very proud of. That's very nice of him to do that. But Christopher Rufo has been one of the main people pushing. James Lindsay's another one who does great work. There's been a lot of people that's been done a really great job at exposing what critical race theory is, and really helping people fight back against it. And my entire perspective has been, and you mentioned it earlier, but my entire perspective has been this idea of moving toward a post-racial society. And one of the things that frustrates me the most about critical race theory is that it's so focused on race, and it demands that everybody focuses on race and makes race central to who they are, makes it so important to identity. And that's the exact opposite, in my mind, of what we need to be doing. We need to be de-emphasizing racial identity and treating it more like skin color or hair color, where, I see the difference. I see that we have different skin colors, just like I see we have different hair colors and different eye colors. But it doesn't matter. It's not going to change how I treat you. It's not going to affect my judgment of you. It's MLK content of character. And critical race people who support critical race theory, they're very antagonistic toward that idea. They hate that idea, and they think that it's oppressive, even, which is just
this is
outrageous.
A good comment. But we were getting there, but they want us divided. From Pip-Boy Gamer.
Yep.
I like to not see race until somebody cuts me off in traffic, and then I'm like, who was that? Asian lady. Got it.
It's funny. Like, we talk about theater. There's a musical called Avenue Q. I don't know if you've ever heard of it.
Yes, that's one of the other ones I've seen.
Yeah, Avenue Q. So there's a song in Avenue Q that would never be accepted if Avenue Q were made today, and it's called "Everyone's a Little Bit Racist."
Yes. Why can't we? Why can't that be a thing? It's so
I know.
It
just makes fun of this idea that everyone's a little bit racist, and I recommend everybody go listen to that song because it's great. What'd you say?
It's so funny because I talk about that in comedy all the time. What people laugh at has not changed as our society has become more politically correct, more woke, whatever, more, that's the thing is woke people don't see it as being woke. They see it as, oh, we're evolving, we're modernizing, we're becoming more sensitive and inclusive. And it's like, yeah, right. Tell me what the last 5 things you've laughed at. Like, everyone still laughs at racism, racist ideas. Everyone still laughs at stereotypes. It's just what's become trendy, like the groups of people that has become trendy to be racist towards has changed. That's it. But among your friends privately, you're lying if you tell me you have never laughed at some kind of a stereotype. I just don't believe it.
Right. I mean, growing up, we would always make fun of things like that all the time. And I mean, you're absolutely right. It wasn't anything that was a major deal. Nobody was wearing their heart on their sleeve or with chip on their shoulder, and it's like, oh, how dare you say something like that? I mean, it just wasn't a thing. And now it's almost like people are so desperate to be seen as a good person. Like, oh no, I would never laugh at that joke. I would never laugh at a racist joke. That I'm such a good person. I'm such a holy, righteous, self-actualized person. That would never be me. Yeah, right, dude.
Because the propaganda affects different people differently. Like if you're like susceptible to the propaganda and you are a black and brown person, well, bing, like, great. Now you can see your whole world through that lens. All your failures are because of this. You're completely justified in your hatred, in having an attitude, or in not trying as hard because the system is rigged against you. But if you're a white person and the propaganda, you fall for the propaganda, you're like, oh my God, fuck. Okay. How do I be an ally? How do I tamp myself down and be like just apologizing constantly, or you decide to be like, I'm queen of the blacks now, or I'm queen of the retards, or like whatever group you want to be like the mouthpiece for.
Right.
And then there's those of us who just are like, oh, that's propaganda. That's just noise.
Yeah. Yeah. I have to post my black square on Instagram to show you that I am an ally. I am committed to the cause. It's like,
It was
what are you
such a
doing?
moment for me. The day of the black square, I was like, I just found myself not being able to do it. I'm like, why do I have to do this to prove what? That I have black friends, that I think black people are great? Like, what? This is wild. And then I was
Whoa.
like,
That's a racist stereotype, Chrissy. Saying you have black friends. You can't do that. That's a racist
oh, right.
stereotype.
Not a lot,
Racist.
but
That's a dog whistle. It's a dog whistle.
oh, right. Like just a handful. But it's so crazy. And then I got shit for not posting it. And I was like, I just like my gut feeling was like, why? Why do you have to do this?
Yeah. Yeah,
It's
I agree.
crazy.
It's
What kind of
well,
a other than people criticizing Donkey, have you got any other backlash from your work, or anybody leave any bad reviews on your book? Anyone trying to cancel you?
Actually, I haven't had any bad reviews on the book yet, which is interesting. I thought it would be I thought it would be a little bit worse, but all the reviews have been positive so far. I get a lot on social media. People will send me private messages, and I'll get emails and things like that. But I mean, it's to be expected. You kind of ignore that. I don't know how many times I've seen the tap dancing Daffy Duck meme. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about, but like, anytime I say something about race, or anytime I say anything about at all, people will post that stupid gif of Daffy Duck tap dancing as this idea that I'm tap dancing for white people, which is pretty typical. You get a lot of it. You're not allowed to stray from the accepted school of thought, the accepted ideology, or else you're a race traitor, or you have internalized oppression. And I don't know, it's nonsense. So, but there's been a way more positive feedback, I think, to make up for it. So like, I ignore the negative stuff. It doesn't bother me. There's a lot of people that support what I'm doing, and I get a lot of positive feedback, a lot of positive messages. And I think that's what matters.
I wonder if Adam Coleman. He's another author. I think his book that's on my shelf, I'm looking for. I think it's called like From Victim to Victor or something like that.
Yeah,
and like,
right.
So it's good to find people that like are exploring similar themes. And then we have, you said something in the episode I was listening to of yours, and I thought it was so fascinating. It was your last episode of your podcast with the cake, cake baking. I want to make sure I have the right title. It was called, from episode 39 of Informed Dissent, Just Shut Up and Bake the Cake. And you said people are terrified of liberty, and that ultimately boils down to problems with the government. I just thought that was so fascinating, because I've never heard anybody put it that way, and I hope you know what I'm referring to.
I
but
do.
If you want to expand a little bit on why you think people are terrified of liberty.
Yeah, well, people have this need for control, and that's kind of a human nature kind of thing, I think. And when you don't have control of something, it makes you a little fearful, because you're unsure what's going to happen. You have to kind of trust that the system is going to work the way it's supposed to, that things are going to fall in line the way they're supposed to. And I think the further left you go, the more control that people want to have over society, because they feel like people are not going to make the right decisions unless they control them and make them make the right decisions. So they have a very antagonistic view of liberty, that like, if we can't just let, to use the bakery example, it's like, we can't just let bakeries do what they want, because then they'll make the wrong decision, and they'll discriminate against people, and they won't bake cakes for Black people, and they won't bake cakes for whatever, rather than recognizing that the market, when allowed to operate freely, punishes people for discrimination, because you lose customers, and you open yourself to boycotts and things like that. Which, as long as the government's not protecting you, that's going to cost your business. And so you either adapt or you go out of business in those scenarios. But I mean, just in general, you move away from the business aspect, and people want, think about COVID. People want to know that other people are going to do what they want them to do, which is the
Yes, that was
absolute
the biggest
opposite of
example.
liberty.
Wow.
The opposite of liberty. Yeah. So yeah, COVID's probably the best example of that, because people's like, oh, well, this is my opinion. This is how I see the world, and this is what I think should happen. Therefore, everybody else must fall in line with that vision. And the only way that I can ensure that everyone else falls in line with that vision is if I use the government to force them to do it. And
And you
so they
notice
have
how the
no
people,
faith.
it seems like the people that are the most outspoken and the most harsh are the ones that they just happen to agree with what the government is also pushing. And it's, I think that's part of why they feel emboldened, because they're like, well, the powers that
Well,
be are
yeah,
also pushing this.
I think a lot of authoritarianism happens that way. I think people fall in line with authoritarianism because something happens and they agree with the specific thing that the government is doing. And then that continues, and all of a sudden the government's doing things that they don't like, and it's too late at that point. Because like
They're
oh no,
already on the
it's
team.
too
Yeah.
late. Yeah, you already gave them the power to do it. Like, then one of the things I always say is that, listen, I know that we have this impulse to do good, and there's this sense that the government is able to do good if we just give it more power. Like, we can solve homelessness, we can give everyone health care, we can make sure nobody's starving if we just give the government more power. But what people need to understand is that the more power that you give the government to do good, the more power you give it to do evil, to do terrible things. And governments are predisposed to do those terrible things, and they're probably not going to accomplish the good things that you set out to do. So you have to be very careful about how much power you end up giving government. Our founding fathers understood that very well, and we've just kind of lost that thread, thinking that, if only we had the power, we can do all these amazing things and create utopia. And it never works.
Yeah, and I've heard people say, "Oh, the Second Amendment, well, it's not really about like us having our own militias or us having our own weapons. It's about kind of like our own government's army." And I was like, "Oh, just people are desperate to misunderstand our own rights. It's very scary."
Yeah. Well, I mean, to go back to critical race theory and queer theory, even the idea that the entirety of our Western society, our entire Western culture, and the foundational principles of our country, they believe that these things are all oppressive. So the Second Amendment, the First Amendment, the idea of free speech, they believe that these things are oppressive. And so it's not that they have just a regular distrust of liberty, but they distrust the entire foundation of our society, of our country, and the entirety of Western society itself. And so they're opposed to every foundational principle that we think holds our country together, that we think that we can that this is what we need to come together and agree on. But they oppose that, and they think that those are the things that need to be torn down. I mean, I don't know how you I don't know how you reconcile that. If somebody thinks that free speech needs to go away, I don't know how you reconcile with that person. I don't know. It's crazy.
And I do believe that the people that feel that way, they just have never had an idea or been passionate about something that goes against the grain, that goes against the government or the masses. Really, it just right. Hasn't come for them yet.
They don't think that far, because the entire ideology depends on them being in power. It depends on them having the reins and controlling the direction of the country and or whatever system they're talking about. But because there's no way that they would tolerate President Trump having that kind of power, for instance.
Right?
Right.
There's
no way they would tolerate that. But as long as they're in power, they believe, since they're morally righteous and intellectually superior, they're the anointed, as Thomas Sowell would say, then they should be given this expansive power and control over people, whereas us peons, like, we're not righteous. We're just regular old sinners who just need to shut up and be allies and listen to them and do what
Yeah, and
do what we're told.
similarly, in Rules for Radicals, they use the concept of like morality as like the kind of springboard to get into whatever else they want to push. They're like, oh no, we're better than you. We're looking out for the greater good. It's like, ugh.
Yeah. Compassion is a key word they like to use. Like, how could you not be compassionate? But when they say compassion, they just mean bend the knee to our ideology, worship our gods or else. That's what compassion means to them. So, but they use words like that, like morality and compassion and things like that in order to justify anything they want to do. It's like we need to give government expansive powers so that everyone has healthcare, because that's the most compassionate thing. But they don't think about, or they don't consider that there are other perspectives, other valid perspectives to consider. It's just, I'm compassionate and you're not. The end.
Yeah. I just think of like all the times I've been in between jobs and I've like, all right, I'll sign up for unemployment. And then it always takes too long, or it doesn't happen, or it doesn't come through. I'm always like, it's just quicker to get another job. Like, what the fuck am I doing? I just can't imagine like teaching my kids. It's like, I don't know. It's just so scary to put your income in somebody else's hands. I mean, we all do to a degree, but I don't know. I'm not explaining myself well, which brings us to Scott Adams. Oh my God. Talking about people who he's currently, I guess, getting canceled right now. Let's bring up this article from the New York Post. Publisher scraps book from Dilbert creator Scott Adams after racist rant. Penguin Random House is dropping its plans to publish a book by Dilbert comic creator Scott Adams, marking the latest fallout over the cartoonist's recent alleged racist rant. Adams' Dilbert comic strip was dropped last week by hundreds of newspapers after the 65-year-old creator advised white people to get the fuck away from black people during his online show, Real Coffee with Scott Adams. Portfolio at Penguin Random House imprint said it is ditching its plans to publish the book titled Reframe Your Brain, according to a report from the Wall Street Journal late Monday. Adams confirmed to the Journal that Portfolio won't be publishing Reframe Your Brain. Portfolio did not immediately respond to requests for comment. The move to cut ties with Adams comes after he reacted last week to a Rasmussen poll that said a small majority of Black Americans agreed with the statement. Maybe this is a typo. Said that a very small majority of Black Americans did agree with the statement. It's okay to be white. If nearly half of all Blacks are not okay with white people, that's a hate group, Adams said in a video, which is posted to his YouTube last Wednesday. I don't want to have anything to do with them. As I would say, based on the current way things are going, the best advice I would give to white people is to get the hell away from Black people. So this sounds bad when you read it in print. But if you go to his actual YouTube channel and listen to this, this part picks up at around 13:30, I think. I'm just going to play a little bit of it so you guys can hear it if you haven't heard this yet.
Rasmussen poll had a provocative little poll today. They said, do you agree or disagree with the statement, it's okay to be white? That was an actual question. Rasmussen asked, white and Black voters, and probably others, do you disagree or agree with the statement, it's okay to be white? 26% of Blacks said no. It's not okay to be white. 21% weren't sure. Add them together, that is 47% of Black respondents were not willing to say it's okay to be white.
And also, this is like pretty common. I feel like we see this. We've been seeing this idea for what feels like years now through different articles. Like, this seems like a really common topic of conversation and something I hear a lot of people just casually bring up. Like, it's like, it's fun. Like, it's fun to make fun of white people. It's fun to like talk about how horrible they are, in TikToks and videos. It's like, it went just from like our coleslaw is bad to like everything white people do is bad. So this is But the way he puts it like that, when he actually adds the two groups together, the no's and the not sure's, and you go, oh wow, 46, that is almost half. But so far to me, I don't think he sounds hateful. I think he sounds just like upset and sort of resigned.
That's like a real poll. This just happened. Did you have any idea? Would you have imagined that could have happened? So I realized, as you know, I've been identifying as Black for a while, years now.
Do you know if that's like he's saying that as a joke or he really was identifying?
I don't know. I don't know how to read Scott Adams a lot of
I mean,
times because
he's the Dilbert creator, so I would
does a lot of
guess he
things
has
to
a
stir
dry
the
sense
pot.
of humor. Okay.
Yeah, he does a lot of things
Because I like to be on the winning team, and I like to help. And I always thought, well, if you help the Black community, that's sort of the biggest lever. You can find the biggest benefit. So I thought, well, that's the hardest thing and the biggest benefit. So I'd like to focus a lot of my life resources in helping Black Americans. So much so that I started identifying as Black to just be on the team I was helping. But it turns out that nearly half of that team doesn't think I'm okay to be white, which is, of course, why I identified as Black, because so I could be on the winning team for a while. But I have to say, this is the first political poll that ever changed my activities. I don't know that that's ever happened before. Normally you see a poll, you just look at it, you go, whatever. Oh, this is interesting what other people think. But as of today, I'm going to re-identify as white because I don't want to be a member of a hate group. I'd accidentally joined a hate group. So if nearly half of all Blacks are not okay with white people, according to this poll, not according to me, according to this poll, that's a hate group. That's a hate group. And I don't want to have anything to do with them. And I would say, based on the current way things are going, the best advice I would give to white people is to get the hell away from Black people. Just get the fuck away. Wherever you have to go, just get away. Because there's no fixing this.
How do you feel when you hear that? Because when I hear it, I go, to me, he has the tone almost of a man who has been like cheated on by their wife, like this is the 5th time they caught them. They're finally like, oh my God, like this person is never going to treat me well. Like I think I have to be done. I think like I'm going to lose my mind if I try to stay in this relationship. That's how his tone sounds to me. But when you listen to of course you read the words printed out, you're going to be like, damn, he's telling white people to get away from Black people. But he almost to me sounds like, I don't know what else we could do at this point. And it persists.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you were looking at it through a frame of just him saying that without the poll and without the other, he talks about the violence against white people by Black people later on as well. And if you view it without that context, then it sounds like, yeah, he's being hateful. But I agree with you. It's more like a resignation. He's more resigned and saying that, listen, if you're going to hate me, then I don't know what else to do about that. And this the only thing I don't like is the generalization. The idea that he says white people need to get away from Black people, which is a collective identitarian kind of way of speaking, where you're saying that there's a group of white people and there's a group of Black people, and we're going to separate those groups. It's segregationist kind of talk, and I don't like that because obviously I'm an individualist and I push for post-racial society, but so I don't like that part. But I do recognize that it's a natural consequence of a race-obsessed society, a race-obsessed ideology that's permeated our country. And now we have this environment where it's acceptable to hate white people, and you mentioned it already, but we have all these articles and all these think pieces and coming out and talking about how horrible white people are. You have videos of Black people talking about how terrible, and saying the same thing Scott was saying, by the way, saying how terrible white people are and that Black people need to have their own areas away from white people in order to be safe or whatever it may be. And I've heard all kinds of Black people say the exact
push
same thing.
to only support Black-owned businesses, no matter what
Right.
color you are. That's what we all need to focus our dollars on. And yeah, it would have sounded better if he was like, you need to get away from the people that are saying this, not just like white people have to get away. It does sound overly generalized that way. I agree.
Yeah, because he's right. He's right. The people who believe those things are a hate group. That, by definition, that's if they hate another group of people based on their race, they're a hate group. That's that's who they are. But it's not black people who are a hate group. That's the part where he misses it. It's a certain segment of people who happen to be black. And I think it's funny too that there's so much backlash to him because again he's saying the same things that these people are saying anyway. So why are they mad at him for saying it? That doesn't make sense. Like black people will come out and say it's like we hate you and we don't want to be around you. And then Scott says, okay, well, I don't want to be around you either. And there's like, oh, then it's the shocked Pikachu face, right?
Yes.
It's
almost
well, how dare
similar
you?
to like libs of TikTok is just holding up a mirror, just retweeting, just reposting. And then that gets liberals so upset. And it's like, I'm just repeating back what I'm hearing, what I'm seeing. And that's what Scott is doing.
Yeah. How dare you say what I say? That's
only we can say it. Yeah. And he's just saying, I guess I need to get away from you guys if this is how you feel. I'm like, oh God, so hateful. So it's like, you just have to be okay with the abuse, like with the constant hate. You just have to suck it up. And he's just like, what? And especially someone in his perspective, like I understand because he's probably done really well for himself. And I wonder if he's thinking of moving to a more red area, or maybe he did just recently move, out of a blue, or he knows people that are moving out of blue cities into red areas. Like maybe that's where that's coming from. Like, yeah, just move away. Like if you can, just go to where you're, loved, not merely just accepted. I'm going to play this through a little more.
This can't be fixed. Right? This can't be fixed. You just have to escape. So that's what I did. I went to a neighborhood where, I have a very low black population because unfortunately there's a high correlation between the density. And this is according to Don Lemon, by the way. So here I'm just quoting Don Lemon when he notes that when he lived in a mostly black neighborhood, there were a bunch of problems that he didn't see in white neighborhoods. So even Don Lemon sees a big difference in your own quality of living based on where you live and who's there. So I think it makes no sense whatsoever as a white citizen of America to try to help black citizens anymore. It doesn't make sense. It's no longer a rational impulse. And so I'm gonna back off from being helpful to black America because it doesn't seem like it pays off. Like I've been doing it all my life, and the only outcome is I get called a racist. That's the only outcome. It makes no sense to help black Americans.
And he was called a racist before this rant. I mean, this rant is coming out. They called him a racist after this rant came out, but it sounds like he was getting it even before.
Yeah.
If you're white.
Or are you gonna say something?
Oh, you can go ahead, play it.
Okay.
It's over. Don't even think it's worth trying.
It just feels
totally not trying. Now we should be friendly. Like I'm not saying start a war or do anything bad. Nothing like that. I'm just saying get away. Just get away. And here's my take on all of it. Everybody who focuses their priority on education does well. If anybody in the black community focuses on education, they'll do well as well because the system allows that. If they don't,
oh, my internet. Come on, internet.
I can't make that my problem anymore. It just can't be my problem. It can't be my problem if the solution is so clear, so available, and people don't want to take it. It's just not my problem anymore. So I resigned. I resigned from the hate group called Black Americans, according to the Rasmussen poll. 46% of them don't think white people are okay. Just being white.
It just sounds like he wants to, like he's disengaging from the conversation. It's like it's almost like I have to just like step away from the conversation because I've been trying to like play by the rules, answer people, help people, participate in this, and it's like it sounds like he's saying every time I get fucked. So it's like I just feel like I can't participate in any of it anymore. Like I don't know what to do. Everything I do is wrong. I get called a racist no matter what I do, and these people seem to hate me. He just seems like I have to check out.
And he's not wrong about that. I mean, one of the things I talk about in the book is the different methods that these people use to bully others and make them capitulate to the ideology. And one of them is the Kafka trap, which basically means you're guilty no matter what. Like you're guilty if you admit guilt, and you're guilty if you deny guilt. So no matter what you say or no matter what you do, you end up being guilty of racism in this case. So yeah, he's right about that no matter what he does, and whether he's trying to help, I don't know how he was trying to help or how he thinks he was trying to help. But no matter what he does in his mind, he's going to be accused of racism. And that's true because they believe racism is in everything and everywhere.
Right.
And
You
at
can't
all
not
times.
be.
So
no, he did
you
not
can't get
say
away
you
from it.
people yet, Davina. So that is a plus. And, it would have been helpful if he was like, I went out of my way and hired a Black assistant. I donated X amount to historically Black colleges and universities. Like I guess he could have, if he wanted to, gone out of his way and been like, here are all the ways I've actually like walked the walk and done the things society says you have to do to be a good white person. But
yeah.
he just
Well,
didn't.
one of the things that I think is, well, I kind of mentioned it already, but the biggest flaw in his reasoning is the generalization. When he talks about the different problems that exist in predominantly Black communities, he's right about that, but it's not because those communities are Black. It's because of the culture that exists there. It has nothing to do with race. And what people do a lot of times is they conflate race and culture. And I think that's probably the biggest problem, because race becomes a stand-in for culture. There are very terrible cultural problems that exist in inner cities like Chicago and Baltimore and Memphis and things like that, where the culture itself is driving the criminality and the violence and the terrible outcomes, the poor education systems. It's the culture. It's not race, because you take somebody out of that culture and you put them into a positive culture where they have an internal locus of control and they value education and personal responsibility and things like that. And they succeed and they're fine. But you see, and it crosses racial lines. Like you see the same thing with white people. There's neighborhoods of white people where I'm sure Scott would not want to live, because it's the same issue. It's a cultural problem. That's the problem. It's attaching race to culture, and I know there's a lot of racial animosity that happens, and the poll kind of captures that, but it's a cultural issue, and I think that's what people need to focus on.
And what a shame that good culture and good habits are associated with being white or not cool or selling out. I mean, that's such a shame, and that's
it's irritating. I got a lot of that growing up. Yeah. Like if you study, or if you don't sag your pants, or whatever, you're trying to be white. It's like, how do you speak properly with proper grammar? You're trying to be white. It's like, how is that?
Like, how much really you're not giving yourself enough credit then. Like that's a horrible thing to say about yourself.
Yeah, it's awful. It's awful, but it's a thing. And that's, again, it's that those cultural attitudes and this sort of, external locus of control that people have, that the system they're oppressed, they're victimized, and the system is operating against them. And if you do anything outside of the cultural norms, then you're being a part of that system of oppression. And it's a very broken way of thinking that puts people in a negative feedback loop and keeps them in those circumstances. And it's awful.
Yeah, I think there's a little bit more left here.
Right. And there we go. You didn't expect that today, did you? But the most helpful thing I can do is to say I'm not going to help. Do you understand that? Continuing to help in that sort of classic, let me help you, give you a lift up, give you a hand, mentor you, hire you, prefer you. I'm going to stop all of that. I'm done with all of that. Yeah, no, it didn't work. The only thing that will work is to say, you got to fix your own problem. You know how to do it.
You're right. He is conflating like the sort of cultural propaganda media stuff and like the problems like in communities. But I wonder if do you think he is trying to intentionally stir the pot? Do you think he had a feeling this would go viral and blow his shit up?
I wonder. Yeah, because again, like during the COVID stuff, he would say things that were really off the wall, and then he would say the complete opposite later on and say, "Ha, gotcha. I bet you thought you don't know what I believe." So it's like he would do things like that. So I did wonder. I wonder if it was a very elaborate troll that he's doing here. Where he's trying to make a point, which I mean would be a very effective point, but it's obviously costing him quite a bit to make it. So I don't know. I mean, he's hard to read sometimes, but again,
Yeah.
like I said, it's not, the things that he's saying are not exactly wrong, other than the generalization, but the problems he's pointing out are, they're relevant and accurate, and people are more angry that he's just pointing at the problems and, like you said earlier, holding up a mirror to them and showing them what they're doing, and they're more angry about that than anything else. So I don't know. I
Yeah,
guess
he
we'll
does
find out.
seem like kind of sarcastic. Like that's just in what little I've heard from him. I'm like, okay, he seems like he's a sarcastic guy. I wonder if this is the end of it.
Everybody else figured it out. I'm not going to speculate, why you're not doing it. I'm not going to speculate why there's a difference. I'm just going to say it's available to everybody. You just pick it up. It's free money. Focus on education, and you could have a good life too. But those who don't want to focus on education, you just need to get away from them. Just get as much distance as you can. That's my recommendation. And I'm also really sick of seeing video after video of Black Americans beating up non-Black citizens. I realize it's anecdotal.
Yeah, he kind of goes off about that. I just wonder if the algorithm does this on purpose to exactly for this express purpose to piss off people and go. I don't know. It's almost like it just feels like kind of planned. It feels like it feels like for some reason we're meant to see a lot of these types of videos for the express purpose of like pissing off like basically people like Scott, or I mean, it would piss off anybody, but
oh yeah, the violence videos, the fighting and the attacking. Like there's a video of a guy shooting a homeless person in
I just saw that.
where was that? I don't remember where it was, but
I think it was Philly.
Yeah, I can't remember what city it was, but I mean, it doesn't matter really. It's just like I wasn't expecting it to happen, and I was caught off guard. I don't want to watch things like that, but I mean that came across my timeline. So I think you're right. I think the algorithm, well, I mean, the algorithm is probably set up to to respond to what people
Right.
are responding to, are reacting to, and if it bleeds, it leads. It's that whole thing in the media. People are. That's kind of morbid based on the example I gave, but when people are more interested in the negative stuff and they're more apt to share negative stuff, and that's just I think that's more of a statement on our culture in our society than maybe the algorithm itself. So people are more looking for things to be offended by and more things to be angry about rather than looking for the positive stuff. Because there's that saying, whenever there's a catastrophe or something bad happens, look for the helpers. And the reason that's a saying is because a lot of times we tend to focus on the negative stuff, and that's kind of a human nature thing. It's just, just one of the things we do. But yeah, there's something else that I talk about, and I'll talk about it really quickly, is the availability heuristic. It's another psychological term. And what that basically means is that the easier to recall something, the easier it is to recall something, the more relevant you think it is, or the more common you think it is. So the experiment that was done was, ask people to think whether a certain list of words would have more letters that started with the letter K or more words that had K as the third letter. And people picked more words that started with K, even though there were twice as many words that had K as the third letter. It was just easier to think of words that started with the letter K. And so you can see how, if the media is constantly reporting on something like unarmed Black people being shot by police, if that's the only thing that you ever see and they're constantly shoving that in your face, then you're going to think that it's happening frequently and all the time. And, it's like, this is a huge problem, and unarmed white people never get shot by police. And these are real things that people believe, even though twice as many unarmed white people are shot by police every year. And it's only it's not a significant number. It's like 20, 26, 25, something like that. compared to like 12 or 13 unarmed black people, whereas people think it's in the hundreds or sometimes even in the thousands or tens of thousands, which is just, and that's the availability heuristic. It's because people it's more easily recalled. They see it in the media all the time, and so they think it's more common than what it is. So
yeah, definitely, that's a really good point. Just like what is repeated over and over is what gets remembered. But it's good to know that now the Dilbert 2023 day-to-day calendar is now a #1 bestseller on Amazon. I'm gonna buy the Dilbert day-to-day calendar. Why not?
I love it. That's funny. It's like that rule, because like people sometimes succeed even when, like, after they're canceled. Like being canceled helps them find a new level of success. Like they think that happened to Megyn Kelly. Like she got canceled and then she went off and did her own thing, and now she's doing great. So
yeah, Anthony Kumi was
sometimes
talking
it's the
about
best
this
thing
the other day on his show, and he gets flack. People call him a racist all the time, but he's like, Scott Adams could do a racist Dilbert book, and he's like, you know what? I think half the country would buy it right now just to support him. Is this what you were referring to, where he's kind of breaking down? Scott Adams explains that the media has been this is exactly what you've been saying. The media has been emphasizing race narratives on everything since Trayvon Martin, and race relations have cratered since this began.
Yep, he's right.
Very much in agreement with a Gallup poll from a few years ago that shows that race relations took a dive, I think around the time of Trayvon Martin.
Wow.
When the media found that they could get a lot of money by ginning up racial hatred. So if you look at the Gallup poll of race relations, it sort of is flat for years, just years, flat. Trayvon Martin, and then it stays low after that. Why did it stay low? Was it just because of one story? No, it's because the media decided that kind of story was the kind that really gets people going. So the media.
When he says they get more money, who are they getting more money from then? Just everyone?
Well, I mean, as far as the like race grifters, the people like Al Sharpton and the Jamel Hills of the world, they get paid for getting eyeballs and getting people. So the media itself, it's hard to speculate why they decided to do that. What was going on behind the scenes? I tend to blame Obama for a lot of the racial tension that happened, because he was president at the time and he did not help at all. And the news media running with the racial angle and really emphasizing racial division and pushing that stuff. It's like who's pulling the strings, who's running the things behind the scenes and decide that this is what we need to do. And it's only gotten worse. It's only increased in up to this when George Floyd. Look back and look how they handled that. That was the culmination. So you do wonder what's happening behind the scenes. It's hard to know for sure.
Yeah, let me see if there's anything
besides that to feed us nonstop white people are racist stories, because it's really good content. Then you add to that the EIS and the DEI and the training that is now the major narrative, the thing that schools are teaching the kids.
He speaks so slow.
Won't say what the percentage is, but there is some amount of the black population that's poisoned. They're just poisoned by the narrative.
That's not going to go over well. But it's like what we were talking about. It's people in general who are susceptible to the propaganda. Like you could draw a circle and say white population and go, there's a section that are poisoned by the propaganda that just are always going to think all white people are bad and go along with all the other ideas.
And that happens. Yeah, there's a certain segment of the population that just goes along with this stuff because, again, they don't look deeper into what's actually happening. Like I mentioned George Floyd. You look at that, what happened with George Floyd and how the response was just completely unhinged on so many different levels. And that had no evidence whatsoever that what happened to George Floyd had anything to do with race. There was no evidence even to this day, there's not a single lick of evidence that what happened to George Floyd had anything to do with race. And yet we're all told by the media and by politicians and by the race hustlers that that was a massive moment of racism and white supremacy and evidence of systemic oppression and whatever else. And another example is the 5 police officers in Memphis who killed the black guy. Had nothing to do with white people, but somehow that was indicative of white supremacy.
They said
And
it was internalized. Yeah. Internalized
'Cause the
racism. That's all these black guys
yeah.
have it. Yeah.
Because the system is racist. Everything is racist. So if everything is racist, then they were influenced by the racism in the system. And people don't look deeper into it. They just go along with it and say, you know what, that makes sense because we have a history of racism in this country. And so that must be racism because, you know, and I'm afraid to say anything about it because I'll get canceled like Scott Adams. So I'll go along with the narrative.
You know what movements didn't take off after George Floyd? There was no counterfeit $20 bills, lives matter. There was no fentanyl overdose, lives matter. Those were not as profitable.
No pregnant women's lives matter.
Yeah.
You robbed that pregnant lady. Nope, none of that. Yeah, so I think part of it, there's a lot of people who are they're zealots, they're ideologues, they're very committed to the ideology. And then there's other people who just want to be moral. They want to at least appear moral. They want to appear virtuous. And so they latch onto this stuff because they think that's the way the wind is blowing. And they don't look deeper into it. They just think, oh, Black Lives Matter. Yes, I'm going to raise my fist and be an ally and so show you how virtuous I am. But yeah, I mean, people just need to know what they're supporting and understand how the media is manipulating them, how these supposed thinkers are manipulating them, because that's all it is. It's manipulation. Somebody said in the comments that the media gets paid for more eyes, for more eyeballs, and that's true. You know, if they can get people to even if it's negative, you know, if they can get people to tune in or click on a link on Twitter or whatever, they're going to do that. So they're going to try to manipulate you and try to get into your emotions. And I think race is a very emotional topic. It's easy to manipulate people with race because of our history of racism in the country. Which, I mean, you know, we can talk about it, but
the media, the powers that be, they're really trying to tap into like human beings' most basic triggers, which is like, right, racism triggers into tribalism, into like, oh, who do I trust? And then like with the trans movement, it's like triggering into like, don't fuck with my kids, like to see how Matt Walsh reacted. And I heard your commentary about it. You know, and I've heard a lot of dads react that way, like, don't you come near my kids, like you like it just unleashes something deeper, especially within parents. And it's like, oh man, it just feels like we're really being fucked with on such a trip, like basic human level, like the biggest triggers, and they're just dangling them over us, anything to get us more divided and easier to control.
That's it. I think you said it, more divided and easier to control. One of the things I said after George Floyd is it was very disturbing for me because I felt like even people who I knew were not super engaged in the narrative of systemic racism and critical race theory and things like that. People in my church even were really latching onto this narrative and feeling like they were victimized and oppressed, or that they were part of the oppressor system. And it was very disturbing for me because one of the things I said was that, man, this really seems like psychological warfare. Like people's minds are really being messed with right now and scrambled, and people are making completely irrational decisions about what's happening in our society, and it's all emotionally driven. And we talk about the propaganda and the effect of propaganda. And if you can get into people's emotions, if you can get them completely emotional and irrational, then yes, you can control them. So divide people by race, by gender, by sexuality, get them emotional, and then you can do whatever you want.
This is what happens when you let women vote. Thank you, Spectral Citizen, for becoming a new member. There's a whole like school of thought, like women women started voting, so they voted more with their emotions, and like something like if women weren't allowed to vote anymore, like no Democrat candidates would ever win. I think that's funny.
I've seen that. Yeah,
It's
I have no comment. No comment on that.
I'm not trying to get canceled. Tune in, drop out. Thanks for the super chat. Scott is intentionally stirring the pot. He did a video after this with Hotep Jesus giving more nuance. Oh,
Okay. I'll have to check that
I'll
out.
have to go listen to that.
Yep. So I have to check that out. See, I was wondering about that, because again, Scott is he's hard to read. You never know what
Mhm.
you never
He
know what
knows.
talking
He's an
about.
older guy.
So,
He's experienced. Like
yeah.
he's worked in. He's not a spring chicken here. Yeah, my goal is to emotionally trigger you in order to get you to slip up.
Yeah.
Which is like what I don't know if you followed the Eliza Blue thing at all. That was a big topic for like a month, and I don't know, it's kind of trickled out now. But she would like when anyone questioned her story, her sex trafficking story, she'd get them very emotional and like make them feel like they offended her and they were horrible people, and then they would back off the questions. So it was interesting to watch.
Well, I mean, that's kind of how the racism accusation works, right? Like, if you have a valid argument and somebody accuses you of being racist, then you're like, oh, whoa, wait.
Hold on. Transphobic. Oh God. Don't call me that. Oh, insult. So the moral of the story is everybody get comfortable with insults. Get comfortable with being canceled. Insults equal control, I think.
Yep. I mean, it's ad hominem. It's trying to get you off the argument and attack your person so that you have to defend yourself instead of focusing on the argument, which is just it's nonsense.
K-Max, thanks for the super chat. Were any of you comic strip fans in general? Newspapers are dying, but maybe you caught the tail end of it. Dilbert was the best one. I remember, I would totally always read Garfield. I would always was the Far Side ever in newspapers? I definitely got into the Far
being
Side
in newspapers, but I love Far Side. Yeah. I love Far Side. Garfield.
I remember when Dilbert like came onto the scene. Like I remember when Dilbert was kind of newer. Let me look up when that was. When did Dilbert start? Oh, published first on 1989. Oh. Wow.
Yeah, I have vague memories of seeing it in the Sunday papers because I would read the Sunday paper and read the comics in there. There was Dennis the Menace, Garfield was in there. Yeah. And I think Dilbert was part of it. I don't remember actually reading Dilbert. As a kid, I don't think it was
right, because it's for adults. It's adult humor. You go, oh, this is boring and stupid. Like but it's basically The Office. It's the same sense of humor as like it's like sarcastic Office humor. I literally lived Dilbert for many years. Like that was my life. Job. I should have read more Dilbert in my various day jobs. I feel like I would have had a nice release. Yes, when you were required to cover your textbook with paper bags. Exactly. Exactly. Those were the days. Oh my God. I remember it was considered like so fancy. I'd see people in my class that like covered their textbook with something like sticky, like a sticky sort of vinyl covering. And I was like, what the fuck is that? That looks expensive. And we just have paper bags.
I am not familiar with the paper bag thing. I don't know what that is.
What?
So
you didn't have to cover your textbooks growing up?
I didn't. No. Why did you have to cover your textbooks?
Is this an old person thing? I don't know.
What? I'm old. What are you talking about?
The good old days. All right. Calvin and Hobbes. Thank you. I was a big Calvin and Hobbes.
Calvin and Hobbes. Yes. Calvin and Hobbes was a big one.
Dilbert's tie. Yeah, the tie turned me off, honestly. I was like, that's stupid. Why is it pointing up? And I just disregarded the whole strip. I judged it. Hagar the Horrible. Yes.
Oh, I forgot about that one. Hagar the Horrible. That was a good one too.
Wow. Ziggy. Remember Ziggy? Oh man. What happened to Ziggy? Did Ziggy guy get canceled?
What was the one with the kids? Blondie? Was that it? Blondie?
Yeah.
What was it called? Yeah.
Oh my God. Wow.
I don't know, reminiscing. This nostalgia.
Yeah, this is nice. Oh my God. I feel like I'm about to watch Married with Children with my dad.
Right.
Watch him just put his hand down his pants like in sync with Al Bundy.
That's hilarious.
Wow. Good times. Everybody needs to buy Leonydus Johnson's book called Raising Victims from Amazon. Listen to his podcast, Informed Dissent. Where can they find that podcast? All
Anywhere
of
you
them.
get podcasts, anywhere you listen to podcast, Google, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, it's everywhere. Informed Dissent. Make sure it's dissent, not consent, because that
Did I say
confuses
informed
people sometimes.
consent? Oh
No. I was just saying, so it confuses people sometimes because they're like, "Oh yeah, informed consent," and it's like, no,
That's boring.
dissent.
Yeah.
I'm trying to be clever. Come on, guys.
Yes, Family Circus was another one.
Family Circus. Yes, that's a good one.
Wow, Blondie. This is great. This put me in a great mood. Everyone follow Leonydus. Check him out. Subscribe to his Substack. Check out his website. Follow him on Twitter. Follow his YouTube. All of the things. No, he probably doesn't have an OnlyFans.
I might after this. I'm thinking about it. So.
There's always that's the degree to which you get canceled is the degree to which you consider an OnlyFans, I think.
My OnlyFans is just going to be me reading Dilbert comics. So, so you know.
In your underwear. It's like sexy Dilbert. That's great. Yeah. That's so great. Wow. It's so funny. As soon as the Dr. Seuss books started getting like out of print because they were deemed racist, I like immediately bought them. Because I was like, oh. And it turns out they were printed like I bought them from a sketchy, I guess, third party that basically just did its own printing. And I was so mad. But it's the same story. Like this was canceled.
Oh yeah.
Because I don't know. It's not even like they say chink or something. No, they say a Chinaman who eats with sticks. Big deal. They just say Chinaman. Like I'm like, that's it. That's how.
I think it was the depiction. They didn't like the depiction of him. It was like, oh, he has squinty eyes. It's like,
Yeah.
guys.
Oh, okay. Wow.
It's like I don't.
Like, big deal.
Like,
Like,
okay.
That's it. Good times.
I don't know. That's nonsense.
Anyway, this was fun. Thanks for coming on, Leonydus. Good times.
No, I really appreciate you having me. It was good conversation. Good talking to you.
I'll have to do it again sometime. Thank you to the chat for your questions and your comments. And